MIDDLEKAUFF! Heavy.
Joe Montana winning games he wasn't supposed to win at Notre Dame. 17-point underdogs they were his junior year at the Cotton Bowl against Texas. They blew him out. It was like 38-13 or something like that. Absolute ass kicker. Then he came to the 49ers and became a legend. And then the Niners churned out legends in the 90s, and Harbaugh created legendary moments, even though they didn't win a Super Bowl. And in a franchise with a long laundry list of legendary wins, this is in the room. It's not tier one. It's not a championship. Long way to go. But this is, in a legendary franchise's collection, a legendary win against the Packers.
Yeah, I mean, the Bengals Super Bowls where he came back a couple times, they obviously had some blowout Super Bowl wins, the one that I remember. Those are in their own tier. Anytime you go to a Super Bowl and win the Super Bowl, there's nothing like it. I would put, though, any playoff game, just because of what's on the line, first, second, or third round, like you can have, like Harbaugh's legendary win at Green Bay, even though it was the first round, was incredible. We went like that was just, it was mind-blowing how badass that win was. I actually think that was the most impressive win of the Harbaugh tenure. I think tonight, at Lambeau Field, against the number one seed, and the way the last month that played in for them to get in, how they won the playoff game last week, is the most impressive win. It's more impressive than the NFC Championship game against the Packers, because that Packer team wasn't as good. Now, obviously, that win got them to the Super Bowl, and this win only gets them to the third round of the playoffs, where they're still 60 minutes away from the Super Bowl. This win, though, in a vacuum, what we just witnessed was on the road, the elements, the way the game started, Guy, to take, like we talked about to open up the show. You're in the octagon, and they take a fucking headshot, 7-0, and you're just like, oh my God. Devontae Adams killing them. You're like, how are they going to score with these guys? And then he just held it to 7-0 for like the next 30 minutes. And it was just, they just held it. And that was Harbaugh-like. Because this defense, it's weird, doesn't quite feel like that, though they've kind of turned into that. The way they're playing right now is remarkable. And then just, obviously, to win the game, to just be in the locker room right as we're recording, they're in the locker room, probably freezing their fucking ass off, thawing out, probably just on the floor, body bag game, like their own body bags, like they're all injured. It's incredible. Like, I just don't, it doesn't get any better than that. Now, it would next week if you win to go to the Super Bowl, but the game next week, you could win the game next week and it wouldn't be as impressive as what we just witnessed on the road. Like, if you win at SoFi, it's impossible for it to be as impressive. It's the weather, it was negative whatever degrees. It was freezing fucking cold. To me, that's that game. I have so much respect for every guy that participated in that game. If I ever meet a guy on the Packers one day that's like, yeah, I was a special teams guy, I might be like, well, your unit sucked. But I'd be like, God, you'd want to know about that game. What was it like? You see the quote from their linebacker? Like, when you lose feelings in your toes and your hands, that's when you find out who wants to play football. And I was like, that is a quote.
Yeah. I think you're right? The display of you're not saying that it's more impressive where it sits in terms of what it accomplished, but just you're not supposed to win this game, right? They are the biggest underdog of this weekend. They are playing the 1 seed, and home field advantage, I think in some ways isn't what it used to be, right? I think crowds aren't quite as loud in some stadiums because you got more suites. You don't have you got more replays, so like the refs getting intimidated, or your hometown clock operator killing a couple of seconds, although Dallas had that last week. It's not quite the same. The greatest home field advantage, of course, is sound. Weather is right there with it. And it's not just that you were on the road. And that was, I think, a hallmark of some of those Harbaugh teams. Yes, they went on the road a lot, but specifically going on the road in frigid Green Bay, Kaepernick, no sleeves, that's where legends are made, right? That's probably, of all the Harbaugh great games that didn't involve either the Seahawks or the Super Bowl, the number one game that gets talked about, and the weather was a big part of that. This game, you're behind. Everyone watching it knows you are on your heels. You needed 2 special teams blocks. Garoppolo at halftime of that game was trending for one of the worst box scores ever. He was 3 of 9, 43 yards, 0 touchdowns, and a pick, and a QB rating, whatever you think that's worth, of 10.2. You were down a starting cornerback who 2 months ago everyone wanted off the field, and now everyone wanted back on the field. Then the game starts, and Devontae Adams catches 4 balls on the first drive. Every throw that actually 3 balls on the first drive. Every throw, Aaron Rodgers completed 4 balls in the first drive, all for first downs. Every single one of them.
Well, I don't think, they didn't have a third down on that first drive. They never got to third down.
Well, it just felt like, oh my God. So then, like you said, with the thing that feels like your weakness, you're hanging on for dear life. And they pulled it together. Rodgers, 225 passing yards, 20 of 29. Hit the under. I've been talking about the under for 2 weeks now. Dak hit the under. Rodgers hit the under. This is now 16 of 19 quarterbacks they've played have hit their under on yardage. And as someone tweeted at me after the second Niner series, good to see D'Amico finally made it back from his job interview. That was the best job interview that D'Amico's done. I don't care how good he was in the room with whoever he's been talking to. That was the best job interview D'Amico has ever had.
It's one of those wins that you have forever. And legends become legends in sports in the playoffs, whether it's baseball, whether it's basketball, whether it's football. In tennis, it's the Grand Slams. In golf, it's the majors. They just are more important. It's not arguable. It just means more. There are more people watching. It's why I think during the regular season, the primetime games can just feel bigger, right? Sunday night, Monday night, because they are standalone environment. And there's nothing like the standalone environment that is the playoffs, because it's the one and done factor. It's just March Madness. I mean, you lose, your season's over. And the amount of people now that just consume the NFL. So those two brands, I mean, I'm thinking of watching this game. I mean, you're talking about two of the biggest brands that we have in American sports. And I think one thing that makes the Packers so cool is they're this little town. I think you talk about the box and just the changing of sports, the venues, and I think Levi's plays a role in that. And definitely, if they play at SoFi next week, that is the modern day version of everything that Lambeau is not. Look at tonight, A-Rod. I mean, A-Rod has 7 million girlfriends in his life. I mean, holy shit, that guy's always got 10 around him.
Buck and Aikman could barely keep it together.
Aikman started laughing because of the chick that was with him. It was funny. He was sitting in the stands. They don't. I've never been to Lambeau. Like, they don't have boxes there. Like, you sit in the stands. Listen, I'm not trying to get sappy here, but there is a purity to that environment that is. It's closer, just where they're playing, it does feel closer to like something Lombardi or Walsh would have experienced than what we're going to experience probably next week, right? If the game, hopefully the Rams win and we cash more money at SoFi. It's just not what it looks like. It's like going to like, an Oculus or, when you first got like a talk radio. But there's a purity to it. That was fucking badass. Now, I thought it was going to be badass. I was not confident they were going to win. I had zero confidence until they blocked the punt, because I just started doing the math. I'm like, how are they going to be able to score 11 more points? Yeah. Or I guess 8 more points, because they weren't going to go for 2. So they were going to need a touchdown, then probably another field goal. I'm just like, how are they going to get 2 sustained drives? Once they blocked the field goal, you and I were on here just kind of watching the last 5 minutes together. I'd say it's got to be, I mean, it's one of the more game-changing plays, I mean, in the history of the franchise. Now, you had a name for it. It's, they have some legendary plays with, I don't know, some of the greatest players ever. These are role players as part of special teams, but just that play. And I would argue the field goal block, we'll get into Hightower, but it's just, now Jimmy Ward is a starting player for a team, and he's been a starting player on a Super Bowl team. Like, people know who Jimmy Ward is, like, in the NFL, let alone the 49er fans. But those two guys doing that, having that moment. Just whenever a punt is blocked, I would say field goal and punts are blocked. It is a jarring play, right?
Yes.
It's just a jarring moment.
Because they happen all the time, and it's just always kind of business as usual, right? Some guys rush, some guys block, nobody really gets anywhere. Everyone agrees to run the other way, right? And that's not what happened. And then the other thing is the ball's loose, and I'm trying to think, like, wait, does it have to go past the line of scrimmage? What the hell's going on here?
I'm thinking Ryan Machado. Remember the block? And it was like, can they touch it? I was like, what are the rules?
I didn't want to say it. I already said it once on the podcast 2 years ago, and he immediately DM'd me. But it's a Fresno State
young.
reference.
Shit
No, it was a
happened.
good time.
Yeah.
It was
Oregon,
a good time. But I want to go back to what you said about legendary moments happen in the playoffs. I don't. It's partly that, right? I think it's partly they happen when you're not supposed to be the team that wins too. Like, let's say that the Niners tie the game, and then Rodgers leads them down and scores a touchdown, and the Packers win the game. That's a legendary moment for Aaron Rodgers.
Sorry, I'm laughing at the pictures of Kyle Shanahan in his like ski suit.
Oh yeah, I just tweeted. He looks like he just played Game 7 of the Stanley Cup Finals. But if let's say Rodgers leads the Packers down, John, and wins the game with like no time left or whatever, that's legendary. That's legendary also. But it would have felt different. I think it always feels different when you're the team that's not supposed to be there. And then you take it a step further. This team was 2-4 and 3-5 headed into November. Mid-November.
It was ugly.
3-5. So you say 3-5, right? Then you say biggest underdog. Then you say it's freezing. Then you say Garoppolo threw. I'll have to check the PFF numbers, but here's PFF Haberman here to tell you about 5 interceptable balls. I don't know if those are the official numbers, but it felt sketchy. But I think that goes.
Wait,
back.
you don't like the out flat route to running backs that are just standing there with the DBs running full speed?
I prefer it from the opposite hash off a back foot. That's actually when it's perfect.
Troy's like, just look. You can pick it off. Just look.
So what I always say,
Stokes would have taken it to the house. I mean,
oh my God, when he wasn't looking. This is when you said earlier, when you said it's better than the NFC Championship win against the Packers. I think the other thing is, and I always say this. Yeah, I agree. I do agree. And I think it's like that game from the jump, everything went their way.
They kicked their ass.
And sometimes those games just happen to you and you take them and you did it and you get credit for it.
And they were also favored at home, like you said.
Yeah, for sure. And this Packer team is better than that Packer team was. And that Niner team was better, I think, than this Niner team.
There's been some internet arguments. You
remember Joe Staley came on our show and maybe among others said this is better than 19 team before the year. And halfway through the season, it's like, well, it's not even a conversation. But all of a sudden you look up and you're like, damn, I mean, this team's pretty damn good.
Well, Debo's better than anything they had, and Kittle is a better player now. I mean, there are some arguments to be made. You know, a lot of the defensive guys are back. They're missing Buckner, but
my ultimate is he coming back or no?
Well, what about Kinlaw? Is he eligible next week, or is he microfracture?
I think my ultimate point though is just that when things don't go perfectly, like those are the moments when legends are made, right? All these Montana games that everyone talks about are not the ones that he led 31-13 going into the fourth quarter. It's the ones he trailed 31-13 going into the fourth quarter.
Well, how many episodes of that did you watch? Did you get to like their Super Bowls, like when they beat Marino?
No, episode 1 I've just gotten through his college,
which is his crazy story. But like, do you notice the Super Bowls that they really talk about with Montana? And you and I we lived through a couple, but we were 2 or 3 years old. Are the Bengal ones where he makes plays to come back? They do not mention him beating. I mean, it's a moment, but like what the game was like against Marino at Stanford Stadium. You know why? Because they beat the living piss out of him. Like that, the defining game for Joe are the catch, or even Steve. The defining game for Steve was beating a Cowboy team that had beat him back-to-back years. The throw to Terrell Owens, right? Some of the games with Favre that you remember, some of the games with Peyton Manning. The number one Peyton Manning game I'll never forget is when he's down 24-7 at halftime against the Patriots in 2006. And he brings them back, and they end up winning he wins his first Super Bowl. Like, you become a legend by winning games that also, whether you're favored or not, like, are you down in the game? Is there a moment when everyone that's watching the game, and these playoff games now, it's pretty clear, like, listen, I'm rooting for Andy Reid tomorrow, but I'm an NFC guy. I just feel like the NFC is just bigger. I could be wrong. We'll see the ratings, but I'm an NFC guy.
Well, if the NFC is bigger with a Saturday night game, it's inarguable. I mean, Niners-Packers, pretty big.
So you just get these moments on the road. You never forget the playoff wins when you're down, because every single human's thinking there couldn't have been many humans. There weren't any 49er fans, unless you're like family of the team and you can just stay optimistic, They weren't thinking, we're going to lose this game. And every Packer fan has to be thinking, like, we're going to win this game. Guys, they were driving up 7-3 in the fourth quarter with like 8 minutes left. The Packers had the ball. And I'm thinking, if they score a touchdown and go 14-3, the score is going to say 14-3. It's going to feel like 35-3, and the game's going to be over. Yet somehow they had like this penalty. It was like second and goal at the 5. They got this penalty, brought them back. Then they tackled. I think Devontae Adams, Emmanuel Mosley had the sweet tackle. Then they got a sack, and they held them to a field goal. And all of a sudden it's 10-3. And even 10-3 felt
Not
like
just a sack.
21-7.
Eric Armstead's first of back-to-back third down sacks on the last 2 Packers drives.
But even when it was 10-3, you're feeling like you got a chance just because of the math. But it was still, it wasn't your typical like mid-October 7-point deficit, right? 10-3 felt bigger than 10-3. And Packer fans had to think, we're in the driver's seat. How are they going to score? They can't really move the ball. They only have one real pass play. It's a slant to Kittle that they probably didn't call enough.
No, they did not.
You know? And it's just like, even if they do get these scoring drives, it takes the Niners a long time. Because I looked up. I was like, oh, I wonder what time we're going to start. You know, it's the middle of the fourth quarter. And I look at my clock. It's 7:30. And I'm like, God, this game's going pretty fast. Because I just, you do this long enough, you know the times of like a typical Sunday night or Monday night game that midway through the fourth quarter, you're talking like, it's usually like 8 o'clock. And I'm like, well, there's just a lot of run plays. It's just, it was just the intensity of them being down. And somehow, I still, probably 30 minutes removed, they won the football game.